What's up, gun people? Bringing you guys a review of an optic today. I got the US Optics SVS 1-6x. This is a low power variable that hasn't been on the market for very long, a little over a year, but there's not a ton of information out about it, and so I wanted to kind of add my 2 cents to the pot and give you guys some somewhat preliminary thoughts. I've had this for a couple months, so I don't have a ton of experience with it, but long enough to at least have some decently well-formed initial opinions. I'm going to be pretty honest with you guys on some of these things. I think a lot of gun reviews online, optic reviews, people love to tell you how great the product they own is, especially if they spent money on it. And I think some transparency and telling the negatives along with the positives is real important. So I'm going to try and be very honest about what I don't like about this. So this is a second focal plane scope. I think that's great. Even though the trend is for low power variables even to have first focal planes, even with some of the budget optic manufacturers, there's not a ton that's gained. First focal plane is great if you're ranging objects throughout the magnification range. So if you've got a 5 to 25 and you might be ranging and using holds at 5x or 15x or 25x, it's great to have first focal plane. With the 1 to 6x though, most of the time guys are going to be shooting 300 yards or less. You don't even need any holds to begin with. Now, if you do stretch it out a little further, say you're shooting at 500, maybe 600 yards, sure, you're going to be using your holds, but at that point, your optic's going to be at 6x anyways, and so the fact that it's not a first focal plane doesn't make too much of a difference. I don't think anyone's going up to 3x and then trying to range or make holds on a low power variable, so I don't see a ton to be gained in having a first focal plane 1 to 6x. Sometimes the illumination also is a little harder to get right with the first focal plane. So nothing against US Optics there. Talking about the windage and elevation caps. They are capped, or turrets, excuse me, the turrets are capped. I think it's a good thing. I don't think too many guys are adjusting dialing for wind or dialing for elevation on a 1 to 6x. If anything, they may be holding. So I think it's a good idea to protect the caps. I will show you guys here is the elevation turret. So 2 things you'll notice, there's 5 numbers on it, and then there's 5 hash marks between each number. If you look at the manual, it'll say that each adjustment is 2/10 of a mil. So that makes sense. 5 adjustments in between each number, 2/10 of a mil, the math adds up. What doesn't add up is that there's 10 tactile clicks between each number. So if you're going from 0 to 1 on this dial, or 1 to 2, 2 to 3, in between each is 10 clicks. So 10 adjustment clicks at 2/10 of a mil each. That means that between 0 and 1 it should actually be 2 mils. And between 2 and, or by the time you've dialed to 2, you've actually gone 4 mils if it truly is 2/10 of a mil per click. So I don't know what's going on with that. Not quite sure, US Optics, what the story is. The adjustments, they are tactile, that you can feel them. You don't get a very loud, you don't get any click at all. The adjustments are a little soft. They're not super snappy. Like I owned a NX8 that was very snappy and you could feel each click. You definitely can feel the individual clicks. However, if you're wearing gloves, I don't know. There's definitely a chance you wouldn't be feeling those. So dropping my cap back on, let's move over to the illumination. You've got 10 brightness settings. You will get a click as you turn on the illumination onto 1, but then there's no more clicks as you scroll up throughout the illumination dial to 10. Not a big deal to me. You scroll it back down, you'll get the click that it's off. I mention it because some people have complained about it as a negative. I don't think it's so much of a negative. It doesn't bother me a ton, but I do mention it nonetheless. How bright is it? It's not as bright as a good red dot. It's not a aim point on a bright day. If there's even a small amount of cloud cover, or if you're not shooting middle of the day, noon, high sun, I think the illumination is great. If it is super bright, you can still see it, but you will, it does tend to get faded out a little bit against a bright background. But as you track from a bright background to a shaded area at the range, say, and then back to bright, it is enough to keep your eye on the center, so I don't have any major complaints about it there. We will talk about the weight. Weight is 22 ounces, kind of middle of the road for low power variables. It is lighter than the original Vortex Razor HD Gen 2 1-6x, which I think is a scope in the same price bracket and is a pretty fair one to compare it to. So lighter than the original. The original Razor, I believe, was 25 ounces. This is 22. The Razor HD Gen 2E, the E version, the lighter version, however, is only 21 ounces. And you do have some dropping down to about 17 ounces, some other competitors. So middle of the road, it's got a very thick tube, 34 millimeters, so different than 30, which is, I'd say, pretty typical across the board for low power variables. We've talked about the brightness. Last thing I'll mention before moving on to what's the most important part of the review in my mind. Last thing we'll talk about before that is the little blade here that allows you, it's almost like a throw lever. It does stick out well. It's easy to catch with your finger when you're trying to turn it, which is good. What's not good is it's pretty tight. And so if I'm here and I'm shooting and I want to adjust with one hand, I really have to crank it over, and it takes about a full second to get all the way from high to low. It's not something that's just a dink. So it's not going to come loose accidentally, but it definitely takes you kind of, I'm not able to stay focused on a target and spin because it takes so much force to push it over. So that's a little tighter than I would like it. So I've mentioned up to this point a lot of reasons why I don't like this optic. Why do I still say it's a good one? Well, the reason is the most important thing in a low-powered variable optic is the glass clarity and the eye relief. Start with the glass clarity. It's clear glass, especially if you're coming from a cheaper $500 optic, something like that. You really will be somewhat blown away when you look through it. Comparing to a Night Force, the NX8, I'd say it's a very similar glass clarity to that, although the field of view does appear to be a little bigger than the NX8. There's a small amount of edge distortion. If you're really looking for it, you can find a little bit of a fisheye around the edges. Nothing terrible, but it is there if you look for it. It is minor enough, and the glass quality is good enough that I only count that as a small flaw, because you really do have to be looking for it. Once again, comparing to the Vortex Razor, the eye relief on this, or excuse me, the field of view at 1x, if you're looking at 100 yards, you're going to have 107 feet from your right edge to your left edge as you look through this at 1x. The Razor HD Gen 2, you're going to have 115 feet. So you got an extra 8 feet there. And if you're zoomed up to 6x, I think you've got 18.5 feet from edge to edge. With the Razor, you have 20. So this is not quite as good as with the field of view as what I'd say is the leading competitor in the price range. Lastly, the eye relief. The eye relief is really good, and that's what's the really redeeming quality with this optic for me. So I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to put it up here and kind of show you what I have, how much eye relief it has. So starting about right here is about as close as I can get to it on 1x and still have good edge-to-edge clarity with no scope shadow. And I'm going to start backing up, and it's not till really I get about back here that I start to get some scope shadow. So from about right here up to here. So I'd say it's a good 2.5, 3 inches. And there is, if you move your head around, it's decently easy to keep that reticle in focus. So I think if you're shooting from odd positions, if you're doing some high-speed LARPing, shooting around cars, barricades, etc., this one would serve you pretty well and be not a bad setup for a 3-gun. So all in all, for the money, it goes for around $1,200, I think is about where you find it online. And there are some flaws, and I do think it could be better. I think they got the most important things. The clarity is good, and the eye box is very forgiving. So I don't knock it too hard, but I do think that US Optics could have done a better job with a few of the details. Really, they nailed the hard stuff and then let some of the details slip, in my opinion. I will say, if you are military or law enforcement, US Optics does really hook you up with some great deals, and just talk to them about that, because they will give you a good enough a deal that I don't think the price point that it's at for military and law enforcement, I don't think there's anything better at that price point optics-wise. So that's my thoughts on it. Please leave me a comment, especially if you own one. Let me know what you think. If you disagree and think it's totally bogus, let me know. Or if you think it's on the money, give me a like. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.